Okay, for those of you who are not familiar with how we're conducting the study here in the auditorium, we're going over the gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in a harmonizing fashion. What I mean by that is we're studying all four of them at the same time, putting them together as things would actually take place chronologically. And some of that takes place in regard to accounts being given in one particular book that may not be mentioned in another. Some are going to be similar to one another, but all of it is the truth, and all of it is to be combined together to get the gospel account in regard to Jesus Christ. We left off last time at Matthew chapter 5, verse 27, as we were studying Jesus preaching the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus giving his explanation of his purpose, or the purpose in regard to the Old Testament, or his purpose in regard to the Old Testament. If you're using the outline that has been given out, we're on the third page, letter F, under Roman numeral 5, and now we're ready at number 4, Matthew 5:17 through 48. And remember, we left off last time at 27. That's where we'll pick up this morning. If you are just joining us, I'm sorry. We already have read Matthew 5:17 through 48, so we're not going to go back and reread all of it at this present time, but we're going to cover it verse by verse here as we go through it anyway, picking up at verse 27. So let's pick up there this morning, Matthew 5, beginning at verse 27. Jesus said, "Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery." Well, when was that of old time? What is he talking about? All right, when the situation here of old time, about now thou shalt not commit adultery, literally when you go back, you find it in regard to the sermon, or in regard to the Ten Commandments, rather, in Exodus chapter 20, listed there as well, where you saw in verse 21 of this sermon as well, he talked about thou shalt not kill being mentioned of old time. That was also part of the Ten Commandments. That's Matthew 5:21. So under the old law system, the Bible was very plain and very clear. Adultery was forbidden. Now, I know that I'm dealing with a lot of folks who probably do know what adultery is and can define it, but let's make sure, in case there is any doubt whatsoever amongst anyone here or anywhere else that hears this class, what exactly is adultery? Okay. Heard one person. Maybe we're not as familiar with it. Sometimes that may be a good thing in some ways, but also we need to be educated enough to understand what it is, because it is an issue that sometimes rears its head. Adultery is a form, now please let me explain, a form of fornication. Not all fornication is adultery, because you can fornicate and be unmarried, period. That can take place. Adultery is the specific fornication of at least one party who is already married to another. They both can be married to another, one can be married to another, but they're having sexual relations outside of the marriage union, and therefore that is considered adultery when they are married to someone else. That is something that has become a rampant thing in society, unfortunately, and is widely accepted by some people today as just part of the normal situation. That's very sad. There are some people who almost think that if you haven't had a, quote, affair in your marriage, that you're the strange one. Well, unfortunately, that's the mindset of the world. Adultery has been, and is still, for that matter, under the law of Christ, a forbidden thing. It is a sin. It will cost a soul its salvation. It will be one of those things for which man will be punished when judgment takes place. So we understand under the old law system, and again he's talking about the Ten Commandments here in particular, he said, you've learned or heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I want you to notice he corrects their thinking again. When we studied thou shalt not kill or thou shalt not murder, they thought it was okay as long as you just didn't do the physical act of murdering, remember? He corrected them and told them, no, it was wrong to be angry with your brother without a cause. And that was the root of it, and they were wrong in understanding, thinking that the act itself was all that was bad. There's a root of it. The problem is also bad, hating thy brother or being angry with him without a cause. Well, he's going to correct them here again about thou shalt not commit adultery. Yes, the act is wrong, but there is also something wrong in regard to the intent. It says, but I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. Now, let me ask you a question. Where do all sins begin? All right, in the heart. Let's go over to James chapter 1. Someone pick up there and read for us James chapter 1, beginning at verse 12 down through verse 16. Let us see what the Bible defines for us in regard to the process of sin and how it takes place. James 1, beginning at verse 12 down through verse 16. Okay.
Blessed is a man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my brethren, my beloved brethren.
Okay, is that the New King James Version there, Jim?
King James.
Okay. The King James Version has there that where it talks about how a man lusts in his heart. Do you see that there in the King James? Someone read the King James Version for us there. Let's hear what it says. Please.
Verse 12.
Yes, sir.
Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Do not err, my beloved brother.
Thank you, Brother Wayne. The process of sin is spelled out for us there plainly. A man is tempted. Who is at fault when a man is tempted? Is it God? No, God doesn't tempt any man to sin. He never has, he never will. That is not God's fault. Temptation takes place when a man is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then, when he acts upon that temptation and that desire, he brings forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Romans 6:23. Well, Jesus is getting to the root of what adultery is. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. He's already thinking about it. He's already lusting after her. He's already seeing the act in his mind's eye, if you will. He might as well have already acted upon it because that's his desire and that's what he's going toward. We have to guard our minds and our hearts to not let those thoughts proceed and enter in and cause us problems. He clarifies what he's getting at in verses 29 and following. He said, And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Did Jesus really, literally want someone to physically maim himself? No. He's not literally expecting someone to take an ice pick or something and job into his right eye and pluck it literally from his skull. That's not what Jesus was expecting anyone to literally do. He's teaching here the process, though. If there is something that's causing you a problem in your life, get rid of it. Whatever the issue is that you're having a problem with that's causing you to lust, to be enticed, to possibly bring forth sin, get rid of it. Because the longer it settles in your heart and the longer you dwell upon it in your heart, guess what? The odds are that you're going to act upon it and you're going to commit that act of sin. And when you do that, you sin in the sight of God, you separate yourself from God, Isaiah 59, 1 and 2. And if you don't have forgiveness of that sin, what ultimately happens? You will be lost, Romans 6:23. So if there's something in our lives that is causing us a problem, we need to get rid of it. If it's the adultery, the lust after a woman in our hearts, or the physical act itself, we need to get rid of it. If we don't stop and lust after one another, we will not act upon it. Now, when I say that, every one of us is going to recognize the opposite sex at some point in our lives. Ladies, it is not wrong for you to find a man handsome. There's nothing in and of itself wrong with that. God gave you eyes, didn't He? He gave you a mind, didn't He? And therefore, you know some things that you like to see as opposed to others. There's nothing wrong with a man being handsome. You say, well, that's a nice-looking man. If you continue to dwell upon that man in your heart and begin to have imaginations in your heart of what you and he can do one together as outside of the marriage union, then there's a problem. Gentlemen, the same thing. Nothing wrong with finding a lady attractive. They bring beauty to our lives. There's nothing in and of itself wrong with that. The problem is when you take it to a deeper degree that is wrong. And you continue to dwell upon her in your heart in a lustful way, and you begin to be enticed to commit adultery. That's the problem. So Jesus corrects them. The physical act itself is bad. He's not saying adultery in and of itself is not bad. Yes, that's wrong. But it's also equally wrong for a man to sit around and lust after a woman that's not his wife in her own heart, because in his heart he's already committing the act. And therein is the problem. He has a heart problem. This is not a heart problem where the blood does not flow through the body. This is a heart problem of sin if we don't correct it, that will lead us to being lost. So yes, if something is causing an offense in our lives, causing us to sin, get rid of it, whatever it is. Pluck it out. It's better to get rid of that one thing than to have our whole body be cast into hell. Verse 30, and if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Same principle. Whatever the problem is that's causing you this issue, get rid of it. It is not worth your soul being lost. That's the point. Now, just let me ask this openly and bluntly. What sin is it that is worth losing your soul? There isn't one. And no matter how much it seems like something that we long for or we really want, there's no sin that is worth our souls. None. Do you think Adam and Eve regretted the partaking of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil after they'd done it? Oh, but it seemed like they were being left out of something. It seemed like they were being left out of all this knowledge that God had that was not giving to them, and God was just trying to protect them, keep them innocent. When they partook of it, they found out just how bad sin really is. The same is true with us. He goes on and he clarifies something else. He said, it hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. He's referencing there Deuteronomy chapter 24, where Moses addressed the issue of divorcement under the old law system. Now, someone, before we go any further, now I want to stop right there. Before we go any further, someone open up to Matthew 19. Same account, or same gospel account, same writer. Open to Matthew 19. And notice with us there, beginning at verse 3, someone read verse 3 down through verse 9. Matthew 19, beginning at verse 3 down through verse 9. Someone, if you will.
Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall leave his wife, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. They say unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement, and to put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away, doth commit adultery.
All right, thank you very much. The issue in Matthew chapter 5 is exactly what we find in Matthew 19 as well. This Old Testament principle that Moses wrote when it comes to divorcement, Deuteronomy 24. This is what we find in Matthew 5. It says, It hath been said, Whosoever shall put away his wife, let her give a writing of divorcement. Jesus addressed this, did he not? That's what Matthew 19, 3 through 9 is all about. The Pharisees did not come to learn from our Lord. Keep that in mind, friends. They didn't come there with the intent of wanting to learn from our Lord. The Bible makes it clear in verse 3 they came tempting him. They wanted to try to entrap him in his words and cause a problem. Of course, Jesus was never going to be caught in the word. He is the one, again, who is God in the flesh. Therefore, he knows what the word teaches. But the Pharisees tempted him, asking him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And that's what you find in verse 31 of chapter 5. Is it okay to divorce your wife for anything? Now, let me ask you a fair question. What does the world think today in the United States of America by large when it comes to divorcement? Is it okay to divorce in man's eyes in the United States for just about anything?
Yes.
You know, it's sad when you go down the interstate or you go down the road and you see all these signs of the lawyers up there and they're telling about these quickie divorces, that no contested thing, this cheap thing is over with. It is absolutely sad that people think of something as marriage so little today. Out of all the divine institutions that God has put on this earth, whether it be civil government, whether it be the Church of Christ, or whether it be the family, the marriage union, guess which is the oldest of the ones? The marriage union. In the garden when Eve was given to Adam, and the first marriage, if you will, is there between a man and a woman, that was predating the church, that was predating civil government. The marriage union is the oldest one of them all. And yet people belittle it today and take it so flippantly today and act like it's not important, and they believe you can divorce for any cause. I've joked around about it. You know what some people can do if they really wanted to? Well, in the morning she's got bad breath. I don't like it, so I'm going to divorce her. Just she snores? There you go, she snores. Keeps me up all night. I'm going to get a divorce. I don't like her cooking. She burns the toast every morning. I'm going to get a divorce. I don't like the fact that he's always over with his buddies. I'm going to get a divorce. Both of them. That's the way people look at it today, so flippantly. And here's the problem. Marriage is not supposed to be the trial run, and then you see how it works, and if it doesn't work, you get a divorce. The trial run is called dating. That's the trial run. Marriage is supposed to be till death do us part. And that's what Jesus talks about here. Is it lawful for a man to divorce or put away his wife for every cause? His basic answer is no. And the way he answered no is he asked them a question. He said, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning, what's the beginning? Adam and Eve, right? He which made them at the beginning made them male and female. What in the beginning, what were they then when marriage was instituted? What are they? Male and female. Do you think the United States of America needs to reread that? Male and female. Friends, God will not join the union of a man and a woman and a woman. He never has, He never will. It'll never be marriage. How do I know that's the case? Look at verse 6. Wherefore they are no more twain but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together. Who does the joining? Let not man put asunder. He'll never join two men together, and He'll never join two women together. Never will happen.
That means also even with a sex change.
Well, you're still the same person. That's the problem in our society today, is this transsexual idea that a man can become a woman and a man can become, or a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man. No, friends, I don't care what they do to their bodies to transform anything. They're still what they were when they were born. Their DNA has not changed. They are still what God created in the beginning, male and female, and they don't, just because they manipulate their bodies and they want to dress a certain way, or they want to wear makeup, or they want to be more feminine, or they want to be more masculine, it does not change the fact that they are one or the other, male or female. It is absolutely ludicrous how ridiculous our society has gotten with that simple truth. I mean, that's as basic as it gets, male and female, and we have gone off the deep end so far that people think now that if you stand for that, something's wrong with you. It's sad. Now, marriage. Is it lawful to put away a man to put away his wife for every cause? No, because He said at the beginning He made them male and female and said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. Do you know what that word cleave means? This is one of the beautiful things about marriage. The cleaving idea is that the husband and the wife are so joined together that you really can't tell where one starts and the other one ends. That's what the marriage union is supposed to be. That's why when we say about somebody's better half jokingly, there's a legitimate thing to that, because God joins them together. When Shelley dies, if I'm still alive, half of me is going to be gone. I dread that day, but I look forward for her to have glory, but I dread that day. Wherefore, the Bible makes it clear, shall cleave to his wife, and they twain two shall be one flesh, man and woman. They say unto him, they ask the same, or verse 6, we went over this. Wherefore they are no more twain or two, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Now that's what the point is. When God joins the union, is man supposed to separate it? That's what He said. If God joins them into one flesh, then what therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Don't rip it apart. God joined man and woman together in marriage. What is God's intent for it? Stay that way. Friends, we need to correct something that's a mistake even in the church in some places. There are some people in the church who have the false idea that divorce is okay, even if it's not for fornication, so long as you don't remarry. No, sir. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. You break the union of marriage, except for fornication, it is sin. God hateth divorce, Malachi put in Malachi 2. He hates it. It is not something that man can say, well, okay, I just won't remarry and I'll stay single. No. If you divorced for an unscriptural reason, you sinned in the sight of God. And you need to repent of that as well. So the idea again is, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? That's what Jesus is addressing in Matthew 5. He said it very plainly, because of the hardness of your hearts. Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But, from the beginning, it was not so. What was first, Adam and Eve or Moses? What was God's original intent, Jesus said, for marriage? Male and female for life. Is that true? Now, when I say for life, it ends when one of them ceases to have life on this earth. Romans chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. With that being the case, Jesus went on to say, and I say unto you, whosoever. Does that mean whosoever? I know that sounds silly, but think about it. Does that mean whosoever? Would you believe there are some people who do not believe whosoever means whosoever? They think it means a certain select group of people? No, it means whosoever. Marriage is not a Christian thing, friends. Marriage predates Christianity by a long time. In the Garden of Eden, there was no Christianity. The Garden of Eden, there was no law of Moses. Marriage predates all of them. Marriage, friends, means whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. Now the question I have, what is fornication? I asked about adultery earlier, but what is fornication?
Unmarried.
Okay. Talking about unmarried sexual relations. Very good. Is all adultery, the physical form of it, is it all fornication? I mentioned this earlier. Is all adultery physical fornication in regards to the sexual relation? Yes, it is. But is all fornication adultery? No, it is not. The Greek word that is translated fornication here in Matthew 19:9, if you go back and study it, the original Koine Greek word makes it very plain that this is the physical, unlawful sexual relations of two individuals or more who are not married. That's fornication. It can be two unmarried people. It can be one married person and another unmarried person. They both can be married to each other, to somebody else, and being together sexually. That's all fornication. Adultery is a specific type of it. Do you know what this rules out too? This rules out anything else. When he gives one exception here, that means it's the only reason that he will allow for this to take place. If a man or anyone shall put away, if you will, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whosoever marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery. There is one scriptural allowance for divorce, and that's it. There is no premise in the Bible for irreconcilable differences. You know what God expects people to do who have irreconcilable differences? Reconcile those differences. That's what God expects. Well, then the process will be brought up, well, Corey, what about if there is a wife beater? Or someone who is a drunkard who is causing their income to fall away? Friends, I don't want to be ugly to you, except it be for fornication. Means what it says, and says what it means. We are the ones, when we start saying what if, who try to cause the problems for it. If we stay with what God has said, there is no problem with it. Do I want a woman to be a punching bag for her husband? No. Can she remove herself, if you would mean physically, for a while to get out of that so he's not hitting her? Well, sure. Doesn't give her a right to put him away as divorce. But she can get away from that situation where she's not being the punching bag for a little while. Try to work it out on another date. If he's drunk, carrying on, and hitting her, she has a right to get away from that. But then they need to try to do what they can to reconcile the marriage as best they can. Yes, ma'am. That's right.
Can you repeat that, Corey?
Yeah, okay.
She's talking about teaching our young folks, especially our young ladies, that they need to understand before they get married that you don't go into marriage with the intent of changing somebody. And I think what she means by that is if a person's already doing some of this on the front end, they're telling you what type of person they are, and you need to understand that on the front end. Sometimes that doesn't happen, though. Sometimes people have that mindset, well, I'll change him or her. Well, if they were that way before you married, then what makes you think they're going to change after you marry? A lot of times it never takes place.
That's with male or with female.
That's exactly right. Doesn't matter gender-wise.
Not just the man.
Absolutely.
It can be the female too.
Absolutely. The ladies can be the ones who are the instigators and the problem makers just as much as a man can.
One of the things that Jen brought up that I think is very, very important is dress with women and attitude.
Hadn't gotten there yet. You're fine. I understand where you're going. We hadn't quite gotten there yet. No, you're fine. We're going to touch on that. We are going to get over there in a moment. Now, is there any other question then on what God's original design was for marriage? I mean, Jesus made it abundantly, plainly clear, did he not? That's what the beginning was about. One man, one woman for life, right? And man wasn't supposed to separate that union unless it's for the cause of fornication. That's the only reason, right? All right, Brother Jerry.
I'm not going to say anything about marriage, divorce, remarriage, but one thing clear in this and all through the scriptures, we control our own destiny, and we cannot blame anyone else.
Well said, Jerry.
That's right.
the end of the day, we are the ones who are guilty of giving in to our own lusts. No one else caused us to do it. We do it. Now, I'm not saying that some people cannot play parts in that. Can they play parts in it to tempt and to entice? Yes, Tamar did. She put on we talked about her recently. She put on the garments of a prostitute, and Judah went in unto her. It can happen that that's part of it, but at the end of the day, who was responsible for Judah committing that sin? Judah was. Guess what? Tamar was guilty of her sin too. Neither one of them were innocent. But with that being said, do we understand now what marriage is according to Jesus' definition? Do we understand the only reason he gave for a divorce that is allowed by God under his law? All right, go back to Matthew 5 then. I show all that because we go back to where we were earlier. It hath been said, whosoever. Again, does whosoever mean whosoever? This predates even Christianity, because Christianity has not come into the fullness yet. Jesus is still alive. And yet Jesus is already telling them that whosoever shall put away his wife, this is what had been said, let him give her a writing of divorcement. Well, why did Moses allow that? Because they had hard hearts. But that was not God's original intent from the beginning. That's what Jesus corrected a while ago, right? That was God's original intent, was one man, one woman for life. So what did Jesus tell them? But I say unto you, here's the correction of their thinking. They think that you can put away a wife for any cause. I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of what? Fornication. Same thing again. Oh, by the way, since you said that, let me bring that up. Jim uses the New King James Version, and it says sexual immorality there. Is that true? Friends, I'm going to tell you something about that I hope you're listening carefully with me. That's not good enough. The translation in the New King James Version of sexual immorality is not good enough. The Greek word, as I mentioned earlier, defines what this is. It's porneia. You can almost see porn in it, but it's not the same thing as porn. It's porneia in the Greek, which is the unlawful sexual relations of individuals. That's fornication. Sexual immorality can rear its head in things besides that. You want to see how that can happen? A man or a woman who is addicted to porn and looks at it every day is sexual immorality. That does not give a person the right to divorce. That's not the unlawful sexual relations of two unmarried people. Is it something that needs to be corrected in his or her life? Yes. Is it a sin? Yes. Is it a grounds for divorce? No. So not all sexual immorality is fornication. And when versions limit it to the sexual fornication, I think they do an injustice to the Scriptures. Because this is specific fornication, not just any sexual immorality. But whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery. You separate the union for anything besides fornication and you try to get remarried, you're guilty of adultery. If you engage in it, it's just as plain. Can you live then in a state of adultery? Yes, you can. Because of the choice of being remarried unscripturally, you can live in that case. There are a whole bunch of people today who believe they're married in the sight of God. And friends, I'm not trying to be ugly, I'm being biblical. They are adulterers. Look at Romans 7. Someone read verses 1 through 3. I say that because I think mankind has tried to soften what sin is. The way that man has done that is, well, we'll give them other terms that don't sound as bad. They're not adulterers. They're just in love. You ever heard that before? No. Friends, the Bible calls it what it is, and that's what we need to call it. Look at Romans 7. Someone read verses 1 through 3 and see what it's called there for us.
Or do you not know, brethren, for I speak to those who know the law, that the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives. Or the woman who has a husband is bound by the law to her husband as long as she lives. But if the husband dies, she is released from the law of her husband. So then if, while her husband lives, she marries another man, she will be called an adulteress. But her husband dies, she is free from that law, so that she is no longer an adulteress, though she has married another man.
All right, it's very simple, isn't it? They get a divorce for any other cause than fornication. They end up getting with somebody else, adultery. It's plain and simple. If they divorce for the cause of fornication, that brings up a different issue now. We need to touch on that. If there is an exception that God gives, that means that it is allowed, is correct? And if it is allowed, it is not sin. Is that correct? Let me give you the for instance. A husband is married to his wife. The wife commits adultery by having sexual relations with another. The husband feels uncomfortable, does not feel like he can stay in that union anymore, does he have a scriptural right to put her away and divorce her? Yes, he does. Should we fight that? Not necessarily. If God allows for it, we need to allow that too. Now, if the marriage union can be saved, would God want that? He hates divorce. But if it cannot be saved, is the man wrong if he puts her away for fornication? The answer is no. Now, what about her and him in regard to remarriage?
Is he not able and she is unable to be remarried?
All right. We have to clarify a few things, but you're on the right track. He put away a guilty party. Is he innocent in the matter? Has he sinned in any form and fashion in regard to the divorce or what caused the divorce? He is innocent in this. He is scripturally eligible now. You know what scripturally eligible means? Let me give you, for instance, two young 18-year-olds who've never been married to anybody get married for the first time. They were both scripturally eligible. They both had a right to marry. Scripturally eligible is also a widow or a widower whose spouse has died. They are now scripturally eligible. Why? Romans 7:2-3 was read a few moments ago. When the husband dies, she's loose from that law. She's no longer bound to her husband anymore. Marriage ends at death. What about the woman that was put away for fornication? She has forfeited her right of remarriage. She is now, from that point forward, a put away person. She is. Yes, she's a whosoever from that point forward. With that being the case, there are a lot of people out there today who are living in adultery because they have, quote, remarried, and I use that term loosely because that's the way man calls it. They have, quote, remarried unscripturally. They were not eligible for marriage. And when they engaged in a marriage that is not eligible or is not scriptural, they're not eligible, what did they become according to what we've studied so far? You engage with someone else who's not your wife or not your husband, what are you called? So y'all can see all that. It's not that hard, is it? Why does man make it so hard? You know why as well as I do. People want to get around things. People want... This is the argument that a lot of folks love that. Well, doesn't God want me to be happy? You ever heard that before? Absolutely, God wants you to be happy. That's why He gave marriage union in the beginning. It was not good that man should be alone, but He defined what the marriage union is and what limitations it has, and that's where we find our happiness. We don't look for it on greener pastures. God gave us a way to be happy. We mess it up, it's our fault, not His. Friends, I'll be very honest with you. No offense, fellas, but I got the best one in the bunch. I hope you feel the same way about yours. But I'm just going to be very honest with you. I got a good one. I sure want to keep her. I don't want to mess it up. Well, this is not hard to understand then, is it? Not when you put all the scriptures together, not when you examine it honestly, not when you see what is said instead of what if, what if, what if, what if, what if. The what ifs need to stop where the Bible speaks. Any questions on marriage, divorce, and remarriage?
Yes.
Ask away. Just one moment.
Now, if
Are you going to give me one of those what ifs?
no, I'm going to try not to use that word.
Go ahead, brother.
Her first husband is separated from her legally. If he dies, what happens? I know she's still in sin, but...
You're saying that they two were scripturally eligible married, and she has, quote, legally separated from her husband, end quote.
Yes, sir. I ran into this before.
Let me just ask you this question. Are they still married or not?
No.
Yes, they are.
Uh,
Who joined them together?
God has joined
All right. What's the only reason He will allow for that dissolving of that union outside of death?
Okay, but...
Wait a minute. Let's answer for everybody else. What is the only scriptural reason outside of death that He will dissolve that union? Fornication.
That's exactly right.
She put him away for fornication? Or did she just legally separate from him?
She legally separated.
They're still married in the sight of God.
In the situation that you were saying that she broke her vows with another man, and her first husband said, I can't do this. It's just a trust issue now. So he legally divorced her.
Well, he had if she cheated on him, he had a legal reason to divorce her in God's eyes.
Okay, now if this fellow who legally divorced his wife dies, how does that reflect to his wife? But she is still in sin, living in sin because...
We have to be very careful there. Yes, marriage ends at death, Romans 7:2-3. There's no other way around it. But a put-away person is also a put-away person who has forfeited his or her right of remarriage. And therefore, we have to keep that in mind, too. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. Over here, somebody had something.
Yes. What about if your husband's not treating you good and you ask for divorce?
You ask for the divorce because he's not treating you good.
Yes. He's not treating you like
Is he committing fornication against you?
I don't know.
Wait a minute. No, don't leave that. Stay right there for a moment. You don't know whether fornication is being committed. Then you have no right of divorce.
Well, I did ask for divorce, but we was remarried.
Right?
After he realized that he had done me wrong,
Okay.
I don't treat me like his wife.
But to answer your question, if it was for any reason besides fornication, then the divorce was not valid. Not in the sight of God. You were still married in God's eyes.
Still married.
Right,
But
the whole time.
I did have to remarry him.
Well, for the legal senses of what man wants here on this earth, I understand where you're coming from, but in God's eyes, you were always together anyway.
Well, the whole point is some of the scripture say, I don't know exactly where, that is the wife is being put away, and she consenting for her husband, that she repent, she,
You're probably referencing 1 Corinthians 7.
yeah, he wants to take her back, so,
Take her back.
yeah.
Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. Because in God's eyes, you never were divorced anyway, because it wasn't for fornication. So y'all were always married anyway, just need to be reconciled.
Yeah, but the whole point is a lot of people knew that we was divorced,
Right?
and so
And that's not good.
I had to remarry him.
Let me give you for instance. If you divorced him for anything besides fornication, I said this earlier, is that a sin? If you divorce for any cause besides fornication, is that divorce then a sin? Everybody do like this. God hateth putting away. That's a sin. You needed to repent of that sin. You needed to change. You did. Y'all were reconciled. You went back together. Therefore, you've done what God requires of you. Now, some people sometimes want to use 1 Corinthians 7 as a crutch to get away from things, but I want to help you out, and I've got to stop here. Our time's already over right now. When you study 1 Corinthians 7 along with Matthew 5 and Matthew 19, let me encourage you to do one thing before you do anything else in 1 Corinthians 7. Read verse 26. Because when you read 1 Corinthians 7:26, everything that comes before verse 26 is dealing with that issue. And you know what he says in verse 26? That he was telling him to do these things for the present distress. Whatever the present distress was in Corinth, that's what Paul was addressing in 1 Corinthians 7. It was not addressing just anything under the sun. If you're going to study it properly, look at verse 26 and realize everything that's said before that is for the present distress there in Corinth. Any questions or comments anymore? Y'all been a great class this morning. Have I left it muddy or have I cleared it up? All right. Appreciate your time.